Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of our listeners and viewers. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to my guest today, Imam Arshad Anwar.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing today, Imam Arshad?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Busy
And
days, running
or
around a lot,
or
but
as he likes to go by Brother Arshad, so people can associate with him more easily.
whatever people like. Imam,
Whatever.
brother, said
That's
all of
good.
it.
That's good. Alhamdulillah. So Imam Arshad is I don't personally know him, but it feels like I know him because he knows everybody I know. He lives in Atlanta now. He's originally from Karachi, Pakistan, the heartland of Karachi. Although people may disagree, it's fine. He's the Imam of Masjid Jafar in Atlanta, Greater Atlanta. I can't say Atlanta. I think it's
Yeah,
outside of Atlanta, right?
that's right. North Atlanta,
North
north of
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah. He studied in the United States, and he also studied at the Islamic, what is it, International Islamic University in Islamabad. He has a degree, I think in fiqh, right? Or am I mistaken?
So my bachelor's is in Islamic studies. I have a master's in educational leadership. Yeah,
Educational leadership.
yeah.
I read it. The bio said a few different things that you few masteries that you have. So
Yeah.
what's it
Well,
called?
one master's.
No, master's degree. Mastery meaning like you have other areas which you're an expert in.
Alhamdulillah,
Yeah,
alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah. He is author of a book, Are You Muslim Enough? Which I haven't read yet, but inshallah I will read it. I will get it.
Yeah.
Where is it available?
So it's You Are Muslim Enough, and it's on Amazon. You can just
It's on
search up
Amazon.
You Are Muslim Enough on Amazon. It's very
Okay.
cheap, and
Okay.
you'll be able to find it, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. I'll pick up a copy tonight, inshallah. And he's the director of spiritual growth at Seekers Institute, which is sort of how I got to know him a little bit more by watching his Friday Faith Hacks, which are quite interesting, quite short, and a lot of hasanat.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So is there anything else you want to let us know about yourself, Imam Arshad?
No, that's good enough, mashallah. You have a wonderful topic ready. So
Yeah, we have a wonderful topic ready. So today our topic is atheism in our community and in our societies. What actually piqued my interest was Imam Arshad actually gave, I believe in September, sort of like two parts or one part about this. And he spoke about it. I didn't actually get to listen to it or watch it, but we've seen, there's this inqilab, you can say, or this movement of atheism, which because of social media, in reality, it's not really as big of a movement as they make it seem, but because of social media, they can make it seem bigger than it is.
yeah,
And it is affecting or afflicting our communities and our societies. And this is the reason why I wanted to talk to him about it. He has some experience. He's well versed in the topic and he knows how to talk about it. A lot of times people bring on somebody to talk about a topic like this, which is a delicate topic, which needs to be addressed, and the person doesn't do justice to the topic. So this is why I looked and I was like, look, Imam Arshad looks like the right guy. He's sitting there smiling. He's like, I'm the perfect guy for this.
no, alhamdulillah. I'm actually
well,
trying to pull up my the presentation I did. I'm trying to pull it up just so I can make sure I have some notes available as we're
okay, that's
talking.
fine. That's fine. He's trying to be as prepared as he can, alhamdulillah.
Oh yeah.
So what's it called? So the first question which I had was atheism. So atheism is a problem in our society and in our communities. We see it. We see it a lot. And being in, leadership positions or counseling positions where people may reach out to us with a wide area of problems. Like, in the past few days, I've had people who called me because they're having issues with alcohol, who are having problems with zina. They're having different problems. And I imagine you being the imam previously of another masjid and now imam of Masjid Jafar, that there's people, young people especially, who are coming to you. Today he was putting, some brother was trying to look for a rishta, I guess, and he was trying to help them out on Instagram. So what's it called? So he deals with a lot of these issues, so he knows them. And how is it affecting our religious community, ours and the communities around us? Can you shed some light on this?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the point that it's more of I guess you could say, a social media problem. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises us in the Quran that this deen is going to spread. It's whether or not disbelievers like it, and that's the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's actually what we see. What's actually happening on the ground is the deen is spreading, and what's interesting is it's not just spreading amongst non-Muslims. It's spreading amongst Muslims themselves who never really got connected with it at a younger age, or were not really religious growing up or things like that. It's spreading, and the growing numbers of atheism are nothing compared to the growing numbers of people coming to Islam. That's something we have to recognize, and the movement is way more blown out out of proportion than it actually is. So, it's not that Muslims left and right are leaving Islam. That is not the case. That is not happening. But there are, for us, even if one person leaves the faith, it's very painful. It hurts, and we want to do our part in making sure that we're trying to be as effective as possible in our leadership positions, that we're educating people, that we're there for people, that we're solving the issues and problems that they're having, that are leading them down this path. But again, we understand that Allah is the one that guides, Allah is the one that misguides. But I've one of the things I keep telling people over and over again is no one is going to challenge Allah. No one's going to be able to challenge Allah's promise. This deen is going to spread, and we don't need to approach this problem as if it's going to wipe out religion. A lot of times, people in our communities are like, atheism is a problem. We have to do something to tackle it, and we need to do something because and they act like people left and right are leaving the faith, and they're not. So we have to be mindful about how we present the problem, because we might what do I say? How do you say it? Like we might present the problem bigger than it actually is, therefore exposing more people to something they don't need to be exposed to. But at the end of the day, now we know that it's, there are growing numbers of ex-Muslims that are coming online. They're targeting our, young people, using a lot of the missionary tactics that were used a long time ago by Christians and other people of their faith to get people out of Islam. And, we just have to be able to be smart enough to respond to that, inshallah.
That's a good point, alhamdulillah. It's emphasizing the fact that social media is the reason why it seems as big as it does.
Oh yeah.
So what, obviously now to tackle the next question, what does seem to be the issue that our youngsters are leaving the religion and joining atheism, which has become like a cult? It's, it is like a cult where they're, sort of like chilling at coffee shops and talking bad about Islam. Like, that's what it seems like they're doing.
It's
what
the cool thing
seems
to do.
to be the core?
Yeah.
What is that?
It's the cool thing to do now, right?
Yeah, it's the cool thing to do now.
So there's, I think the problem is twofold. Number one, and this is the area where we have to really step up our service as a community, and that has to do with, in my book, the last chapter of my book is about. So the book is based on conversations I've had with actual people, difficult conversations, and so the last chapter is actually about, I'm not Muslim anymore, I don't believe in God, or things like that. And what a lot of studies have shown is that people are gravitating towards atheism not because of reasonable, logical, rational arguments, but because they are emotionally hurt by a traumatic experience. That's been my experience as well. I put out a call a long time ago for people that have left the faith or are thinking about leaving the faith, just to come in and have a conversation with me. And people showed up, young people in their 40s, 50s, and the conversations we had were always able to pinpoint a moment, a specific thing that happened to them that led them to start now Googling and thinking about Islam or what's wrong with Islam. And it kind of all ended up with, why would God do this to me if God is like this? If we're told God is merciful, why is this happening? I'll give you an example. One of the people that was older, in their 40s, 50s, had been struggling financially for years. And they lost their job, 10 years ago, for example, and then they just have been struggling finding a job. And we're having this conversation, and I'm thinking, man, why didn't I know that you had lost your job? And, as a community, we're supposed to be the ones to step up and support you. And that's why we have sadaqah. That's why we have zakat. You should have never gone, feeling like you can't provide for your family when you have a community to turn to. And so some of these are failures of our communities to recognize that people go through difficult times. How are we there supporting them as a community? People lose their loved ones. They lose their jobs. They lose opportunities. And these are all, avenues by which Shaitan can come, whisper things to them, and then they start thinking, or, they listen to a khutbah, they misunderstand, Allah is merciful, Allah loves you, Allah provides for you. It's like, yeah, but I don't feel loved, I don't feel provided for. And, and that those things also come from the community. That's why we've been, commanded with so many things. So that's one of them. One of them is usually some kind of traumatic experience. The other one, we have to kind of face up to this, and this is not something people like to hear, especially people that are leaving the faith. It's selfishness. It's just that I don't want to do this. I don't want to have these limitations. I don't want to not drink alcohol. I don't want to, have to eat certain things, etc., etc. And it comes from a place of I just really don't want to, and that's very scary because that's just outright disbelief right there. That's just basically saying I do not want to accept this at all. But it turns into I can't just say I don't want to do it because of the way our communities are structured, right? And so it's like
Yeah.
I got to justify this. So how am I going to justify it? I'm going to go Google what's a good idea or what are good arguments against Islam. And I've literally had people sit in my office, multiple people give me the same reason. And I'm like, hang on, that's the first Google result that comes up when you Google what's wrong with Islam or why, why should I leave Islam? And they'll all quote some, Hitchens or Dawkins list of things that are wrong with Islam. And so, you end up finding out that people are not rationally leaving the faith. They're leaving it. It's emotional based. Either it's something that's really hurt them, and we weren't able to do something about it, or it's just selfishness, and they're just trying to justify it as rationality, but they really can't.
Yeah, I mean, Dawkins is one of the guys who is okay with incestuous relationships and things like that. A lot
Oh
of
yeah,
his.
I mean, if you start going into what these, especially these new atheists, that kind of things they say, I
Yeah.
mean, even people that don't want to believe in God are gonna, because even people from that movement have left that movement because it's turned into an almost a violent extremist movement.
It is. They you see a lot of times where they encourage violence towards Muslims, and it
Oh yeah,
turns just into that, and then they're like, well, we don't encourage violence against anybody. It's easy to say it out. It's easy to say sorry afterwards.
oh yeah.
Um, so one of the things which you highlighted was community. Now one of the things which I've seen is obviously growing up in America. I was born and raised over here in the South. There was a lack of scholarship, a
Hmm.
lack of education.
Yeah,
Obviously, uncles trying to do the best they can from the knowledge they have, dealing with problems which they never imagined they'd see,
yeah,
problems they never saw overseas, problems they never imagined they'd see here with maybe their own kids, with kids in the community, not being able to provide like a nurturing environment. Is this another reason why people from the community is not having proper education and not having proper people to turn to? Is the reason why people are turning to atheism?
it could be, but
Okay.
I personally don't think so. I
Okay.
personally think, from my experience, the faith experience is directly related to the people experience that you have, which
Mm.
is why our faith is so strong in emphasizing good character,
Mm.
supporting each other, taking care of people, providing for them, looking out for them, visiting the sick, for example. The faith presents itself through the faithful, which is why the Prophet ﷺ was the person who he was chosen to convey the message, which is why we have the etiquettes of giving da'wah, and what you should, how you should present yourself, and all of that stuff that's a part of our faith, because people are impacted by the people they deal with. And I don't blame the lack of scholarship,
Okay.
but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're a minority in this country. We're like
Yeah.
1% or a little bit more than 1%, or some estimates
Yeah.
a little bit less than 1%. Just take a look at the number of inputs a young person has in their life, right?
Yeah.
Sunday school, for example, and when I do consulting for masajid and Sunday schools, we always talk about this. We're like, you guys have to understand, for as a masjid, as a Sunday school, for example, you have a child for 4 hours in a week. But if that child is in public school, it's 5 to 7 hours a day for 5 days a week, right? So you're talking about 30. You're battling with your
35
four
hours.
hours, 35 hours worth of stuff that's being implanted into them from their teachers, from their friends, from the music they're listening to, from the conversations they're having. Then they go home, and then they have internet and social media, movies and media and all this stuff. And so there's so many inputs. And they have their family, then they have their friends, and the religious input is very little.
Yeah.
We have to understand that what is the religious environment input for the majority of our young people and our people in America. How much religious input are they actually getting as compared to something else? And so that's one of the major problems, is that we're surrounded by an environment that is not actually in line with our values.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to jam our values in a Sunday school or in a halaqah or this or that. And one solution for that is we need to have more experiences as a community. We need to have not just halaqas in the masjid.
Yeah.
We need to have like gatherings. We need to have fun together. We need to make sure that we have opportunities to have each other as friends. And it's so much better to have a Muslim who's a little messed up as a friend, but still prays, than
Yeah.
someone who is, gonna try and convince you to leave your faith because, oh, it's so limiting, oh, it's so this, oh, it's so that. We all know what a problem peer pressure is, and just think about how many inputs you had growing up that were outside of your religion and that you had to battle with. And so that's the real problem. It's not necessarily that we have a lack of scholarship. We just don't have enough interactions as a community
Yeah.
with each other, and that's something we got to try and solve, is how can we increase the number of Muslim inputs, faith-based inputs into our lives, to counter all the opposite non-faith-based inputs that we have
That
that are such a regular part of our life.
that makes a lot of sense. We've been trying to emphasize that, where we shouldn't just be focusing on halakat, we should be focusing on fun experiences, taking all the Muslim
Yeah,
kids to go paintballing, taking all the Muslim kids to a trampoline park, so they're
yeah.
surrounded by their own, so they feel comfortable amongst their own. That's one of the problems. Obviously, I think you did grow up here, right?
I've been here since the second grade. That's when
Okay,
my
so you,
family
you
moved
grew up
here.
here.
Yeah,
So the one of the problems which we always face is we don't have enough time with our own.
yeah,
That's why we feel a lot of times alienated, like, well, these are people are nothing like us, our houses are so different, our parents are so different. It's sometimes it's a very difficult experience. And a few weeks ago I had a podcast which I did on mental health with a scholar from England, and we spoke about the fact that a lot of people, when they suffer with mental health issues, or mental health conditions, this might be a reason, is not being surrounded by your own people
mm,
and feeling alienated.
yeah,
And that's why they suffer through anxiety and depression, because they don't know who they are anymore.
yeah. Yeah, the
So
lack of having a proper identity, and
yeah,
it's a serious issue. So, for example, you mentioned
yeah,
my growing up. I grew up without really any Muslim community, meaning I didn't even have a masjid in our city. And
really, wow.
Sunday school, we went there. It was what it was. Everybody tried their best.
Yeah.
Uh, but I had a few, we still had, families that lived close to us. So, our parents made sure that we were spending time
Mm.
at other people's houses. And when we're there, when it's time for prayer, we're praying. And one of the things my father actually did, which was really nice, was he set up a neighborhood prayer. So
Yeah,
Salatul
wow,
Isha would be done in our neighborhood at somebody's house. We had about 4 or 5 families living in a neighborhood. This is an area which has very few Muslims.
that's nice.
This is down south Mississippi. Literally no masjid in our city. The masjid was in the next city. But what we had was, a nightly. It turned into a nightly thing because it was just in the neighborhood. We would go and pray Isha, and my father would just read from, or somebody would open the Quran and read
Yeah.
a few ayat, read from one of the tafsir books or something. And that was it. But it was just one other input that was being put into our lives, right? And so small ways of increasing those inputs, and we were spending time, with people, learning, our, to say salam when we go in, take off our shoes. It's just small little things, but just keeping our adab and our culture, alive. And it's an important thing to think about. It's, we don't just need educational opportunities. We just need opportunities to be with each other, to know that there's a community, and especially faith leaders themselves. So, like, imams and people that are working in youth director positions, board members. We all need to understand the problem, and we have to curate the solution, right? So it's not just having random events that just make sense, but it's really sitting down with your board or your executive committee, your imam, your volunteers that are your active people in the community, and saying, what do we need to plan so we can have a lot of opportunities for people to come to the masjid, or to come to a place where there's a Muslim there's a Muslim event that is happening. And that curates friendships, that curates opportunities. The imams and your faith leaders can get to know people. They can understand, if you have, offer themselves. If you have issues, come talk to us. All of that, and that's the kind of stuff that needs to be happening a lot more.
So I, one of the things which I feel from our conversation, which we're really, connecting on, is creating that community feel, or creating that, safe environment, if you want to call it,
Yeah.
where people can feel safe being themselves.
Yeah,
And
and we have to put up, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
mentions that, the one that mixes with people and is tolerant with the harms that they're going to face in their company is better than the person that does not mix with people and is not tolerant of their of what comes of that. And we have to stop with the expectation that everyone's going to come to our events and know how to behave and know what to do and know where to sit and know how to and who not to talk to and who to talk to. That we have to become patient and tolerant with the fact that the guy's going to go talk to the girl. That they we just and the Prophet ﷺ told us this: when you engage with people, you're going to have to deal with a lot of things that you may not be comfortable with yourself because you know more, or you're more you're different in your own practices. But that's what needs to be done. We really need to have a more open mind and a more tolerant mind. And I say tolerance. That is my expression of sabr. I don't use the word patience because for in the American context, patience has turned into wait, and that's not what the word sabr means. It's really to tolerate it and keep going forward. And a lot of we have to become that line of defense, that the imams and the leaders have to become that line of defense that make people feel comfortable coming to a masjid or a gathering, and they're protected even if they may not be there in a way that they're supposed to be there. They still feel protected, and I've actually experienced a lot of positive outcomes from this. I'll give you one example. We had there was a lady that I was dealing with who was going through a divorce, and the only reason she came to the masjid was because her husband brought her, because he was trying to save his marriage and this and that. He ends up in jail for some reason, and that marriage doesn't work out, it dissolves. But the experience she had in the masjid with myself and in the office and then trying to figure this out, she ends up bringing her kids for the Eid prayer. And but she shows up in yoga pants and a tank top because that's she hasn't been to a masjid in years. And alhamdulillah, we had built enough of tolerance in our community to be like, hey, you want to come, right?
Yeah.
And luckily for us, it was the third Eid prayer, which was like the emergency Eid prayer, so there wasn't that many people. Somebody handed her a scarf, she put on a scarf, arms bare, and she's just praying in the masjid. Now you can imagine any like how many people would be like, how is this okay? But she
Imam
came.
Arshad, what are you doing?
Yeah, and we had to hear a lot of that. But she brought her sons, and she said, I want my kids to pray Salatul Eid. So I took their sons, we went, we prayed, this, that. And what you saw was more attendance to the masjid. And every Jummah, there was, a level of improvement, right? And she, because she was coming, she was learning, she was understanding. And nobody had to say anything. But it literally happened on its own. The development happened on its own. The interest happened on its own. So if we can do that, it's literally, we all quote the hadith of the person that came and urinated in the masjid. That is the example, and how the Prophet ﷺ handled that person. And that's how we got to handle people that are coming in and they're not doing anything near urinating in the masjid, right? We have to be more tolerant of that.
Yeah,
I apologize if you hear rain. It's raining here. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. No, I don't hear anything. You're
Okay,
good. Your microphone's pretty good. So okay, what can we do to combat the uptick in interest of turning away from Islam, and how can we help those who maybe are middling? There's a possibility of bringing them back or showing them the way back, or people who may be atheistic of mind or agnostic of mind, but there's a possibility of having a stimulating conversation with them. How can we approach that?
So can you repeat the first part again? I kind of
The first part is, how do we combat with the uptick? Like, there is, we do see it, that it is happening. There's certain people in our community. And one thing which I remember, I came to Atlanta, I think 2 years ago in November, and me and Mufti Samir had a program at Masjid Hamza in Al Fareda. And over there, we spoke about atheism. And one of the things which Mufti Samir brought up was somebody he knew had become atheist. And it wasn't more due to the fact that he didn't love Islam anymore. It was due to the fact that he got in a relationship with somebody and they showed him what you can do as not being a Muslim, drinking, partying, stuff like that. And that's what drove him to atheism. And a lot of times you see that. So how can we, reason, logic, how can we help people out who are maybe still open-minded?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things we need to do is be aware of the research that's being done on the Muslim community in particular, right? Because the Muslim community is different than other communities. So AMJA, the Association of Muslim Jurists of America, they just had an imams conference that they dedicated a whole topic to this. So if you go to their website, which is amjaonline.org, you can access a lot of those papers. and wonderful scholars came together, put together a lot of valuable information. And so the statistics are there, what's causing people to leave. We need to do our research. We need to study first and foremost in detail what is happening, right? That's why I say this is just one of the issues, right? The people leaving Islam is one of the issues, but it's tied to so many other issues that we're already trying to kind of combat and trying to work with, right? And so we need to just have an understanding, why are people drifting? What are some of the common issues they're having? Do they feel that the deen is too strict? And why do they feel the deen is too strict? Is it the way that it's being presented by their community or their faith leaders? Well, can we step back a little bit and just try to focus on the basics, rather than driving people away with very, if they're not ready for some more specifics. But studying the issue is very, very important. There's different types of atheists, right? There's different types of a person that leaves Islam. The selfish one, it's you're not going to really convince. But like I said, a lot of it is not based on rational arguments anyway. It's people thinking that they are able to rationalize their leaving Islam. I'll give you an example. I had a person who had left the faith sit in my office and memorize Quran and all this kind of stuff, and he's talking to me about how this is stupid that you believe in the religion and all. And before this, someone that's very engaged in the faith, very active, proud Muslim, all this kind of stuff. Obviously something happened in his life personally, and he no longer wanted to, he was mad at God, which what we call mesotheism, right? When it's not that you don't believe in God, it's you're mad at God, and now you want to leave. So the arguments, the rational arguments started coming. How can there be a God? Science says this and science says that. And I don't like to argue with people on specifics that I know even they don't know the details of. My point was this. My point was, look, you're telling me that for 20 something years of your life, you've been stupid. And now for the last few weeks, you've had a realization. You're saying you're the smartest person in the room. How stupid do I have to be to believe that someone that's telling me that I've been stupid for 20 years is now telling me they're smart? I don't waste my time a lot of times with these. There is a time to have those arguments that are based in rationality. That's in the classroom. So I'm teaching an Aqidah class right now, and so we're talking about that stuff in the Aqidah classroom. When you're arguing with somebody, a lot of times it's pointless because they don't want to accept rationality to begin with, right? I mean, quite frankly, the most irrational thing you can ever believe is that something came from absolutely nothing. And you don't, if you can't understand that, I don't know what you can rationalize. Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he always said, if I argue with a learned person, I'll be able to convince them. But if I argue with an ignorant person, they'll always win, because there's no point sometimes in arguing with an ignorant person. So we have to pick our battles. I think we need to have a lot more educational opportunities for our community. And that's where we present the more rational side of our arguments, etc. But when you're dealing with someone that's showing up and challenging you, and they especially if they demand to have like a public debate and all this stuff, it's a spectacle. They're gonna make a spectacle out of it. And if you can have a private conversation with them and have that conversation with, hey, what happened? What's can we fix something that happened, and this and that. And there is room for bringing people back through just rational arguments and things like that, but they have to be ready for it. And if they're not, it's almost pointless. So we have to learn to pick our battles. We have to understand Allah guides and Allah misguides, right? Iblis is the biggest example of someone that rationally understands 100% there is a God, just doesn't want to believe, just doesn't want to do anything God says, wants to openly go against Allah. And sometimes we're not dealing with an atheist. Sometimes that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a person that gets it. They just don't want to do it. And so now the easiest door for them is, there's a lot of ex-Muslims out there, then this is what they say, so I'm just going to say the same things they say, so that people don't bother me about why I really left, or why I'm really not doing this religion anymore.
That makes a lot of sense. You'll see me throughout the course of the podcast, and I've said this to other guests as well. I'm writing. It's like, for me, it doesn't matter who the guest is, I'm learning something. So throughout the course of the podcast, I'm writing notes, writing timestamps, just different points and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So one of the things so there was a hadith, one of the atheists, on his YouTube channel, he quoted a hadith, and I'm not going to go through the whole hadith, but it was talking about inheritance, and how one Sahabi, he passed away, And before he passed away, he distributed everything. He distributed slaves, so on and so forth. But when I guess the inheritors, they came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said, this needs to be adjusted. Because he gave it away right before he was passing away, and the Prophet ﷺ readjusted it. He freed, I believe it was 3 of the slaves, and 2 of the slaves remained slaves, and he said you can release them if you want. And they made it seem like, oh well, the Prophet ﷺ wanted to keep them slaves. But I spoke with an alim. I messaged him and called him and I spoke with him. He's like, look, you have to understand the matters of inheritance. They're very delicate. He's like, what the Prophet ﷺ did is he called him back and he said, look, he did it in a time where he wasn't supposed to be distributing things, and he readjusted it according to the rules and regulations. He's like, so, in the matters of atheism, if the atheists can't understand rules of logic and how, laws work and stuff like that, he's like, that's their fault. We can't help them. He's like, but, there's certain things which, and you hear atheists a lot of times, you'll ask them questions like, well, where do things end then? You guys don't have any rules or regulations or logic when it comes to certain points, like, for example, incest, or other relationships like that. Like, you guys don't have anything. You guys want everything to be open. At what point does it end? They're like, well, no, that's inhumane, but you guys don't have any. There's no block that, oh, okay, these are our rules that we follow. And I know I sort of went on about this, but that's something that, like, they don't understand logic, Islamic laws, and they just go off on anything they want.
If you notice what they do, the arguments that they bring, except for if they're talking about cosmology and this, and if they're trying to scientifically show that there actually is no God. Hamza Sources, by the way, has done a wonderful job destroying a lot of that, because he basically has said they're building all of these arguments off of an assumption. The assumptions can't be proven by their own methods. So there you go. That's pretty much the end of atheism right there. If you want to say that everything has to be proven through a blind physical scientific process, that's an assumption. You have no blind physical scientific process to prove that assumption is correct. You're just kind of working off of it. So that literally destroys every argument they bring from a scientific perspective. Not to point out that there are the overwhelming majority of scientists in this world are theists. Largely in the West, there's a problem. And that has to do with the history of the West and the Christian church, which was very oppressive towards the scientific mind. And so that's where that problem comes up. But if you look at the majority of the arguments people bring up, they're emotional arguments. They're not rational. So even this argument of, he distributed the inheritance this way, he wanted this. So what? How is any of that a problem when it comes to believing in God? It's not. You just don't like the way the inheritance was split. That's the problem. There's not even a theological problem. So that the issue of and I just openly, honestly say this. People say, if God created the world, why is there so much evil? And obviously, there's ways to answer that problem. First of all, the question itself is problematic. There's a lot more good than evil in the world, and the evil is perpetrated by people. And if not for them doing, every country in the world has a law enforcement department or something, especially developed to stop crime, et cetera, et cetera. So people are not necessarily, there's not more evil in this world anyways, but that still is just an emotional argument. It's not a rational argument to disprove God anyways, because let's say God created the world and he wanted to punish everybody. So what? That would be your reality. If that's what it was, that just because you think there is evil and harm, that how does that mean that there's no God? And I sometimes give this example, and I'm inspired by some of the stories of our ulama of the past. I think you might know this one better. I can't remember, but somebody had argued about, show me God, and if I can't, and the answer was like a slap in the face, and it was like, show me pain or something like that. But this problem of because there's so much evil, there can't be a God. So if I start being just abusive towards you, does that mean you're going to come to the conclusion that I don't exist? Like that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So it's not a rational argument; it's an emotional argument.
Yeah.
Sometimes they come from very, very good places in people's hearts because they don't want to see this evil, and we have to be able to recognize the good that people have inside themselves when they're struggling with this issue. They don't want to see this evil, and what we have to do is present the fact that there is this evil perpetrated by men, and God has given us a solution, and God has given us a mission to go and challenge and solve these issues. That's why we have the majority of the people doing charitable work in this world. I can't think of one organization that's openly atheist that promotes itself as a non-faith-based organization that is doing charitable work to solve, hunger and poverty, etc., in this world. Red Cross is a Christian organization, right? That one of the largest in this, Salvation Army in America is a Christian-based organization.
Yeah.
Show me where are these, all these people that care so much about the world that are, blaming, theists for all these problems. Where is their solution to poverty and hunger and all these things that are happening? I don't see it. I really don't see it. And so, the fact is that the better people in this world are the people that understand there's a God, that they're answerable to God for the things they have to do.
That's
But
true.
the majority of these arguments are based in emotion. They're just drowning in emotion. They're not rational whatsoever. And we have to be able to understand that and call it out for what it is.
Yeah, I think the Satanists do more than the atheists to help people out. Not endorsing them, just saying it.
What
So
was that? Sorry?
I said the Satanists do more to help people out than the atheists do. Not endorsing them, just putting it out there.
Absolutely.
They need to look at what their competition is. Last question I have, because we both need to go for Isha, is
Yeah.
the Gora complex. And how is it playing into their mindset? Because a lot of them they're enamored and they're in love with these Richard Dawkins, and they don't love Darwin because they can't stand behind his his ideology. But
Yeah.
Dawkins and other ones they love. I don't even know their names. I don't even care for them. But they just love them, and they're like enamored by this colonizer syndrome that they have.
Yeah.
Shed a little bit of light on that before we close up.
What's interesting is, we should not be surprised that we're dealing with atheism here in America. Just look at the history of so many of the Muslim countries. There have been large secularist movements in so many Muslim countries. There are large populations of people that proudly call themselves secularists. They challenge religion. They challenge religious practice and ideology, et cetera, et cetera. This is happening in Muslim countries. Turkey, not too long ago, what kind of governance did you have? Some places, some of these, I'm not sure if it's Uzbekistan or some of these places where you have very oppressive behavior towards people that want to practice Islam. I remember some of my teachers who were from Egypt. They said when they would be traveling back to Egypt, they would shave, and they said if our passport pictures don't have beards, and we travel back and now we have a beard, we're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Egypt. This is the home of Al-Azhar. This is the home of Darul Uloom in Cairo, in Al-Qahira. So just look at what's happening in our Muslim societies, how much secularization has taken place, how much that ideology has rooted itself. We're worried about atheism here. I think it's more of a problem in the Muslim world than it is here, because you have people that have actual authority that are challenging religious practice and religious behavior and all this stuff. So this is not a new thing. This is nothing new whatsoever. But you mentioned the Gora complex. I mean, we have a history of being colonized, foreigners coming, taking over, brutalizing local populations. What happened in India, in Pakistan, what happened in North Africa,
Everywhere.
Just an absolute chaotic mess. And what they left behind was a lot of influence, and they left behind individuals that would carry on their dawah, right?
Yeah.
Even in Pakistan now, what is the standard for law? When you go to law school, what law are you learning?
British
are you learning
law.
a law that was developed by the Muslims that developed this country that said, Pakistan ka matlab kya, la ilaha illallah? Is that the law that's being developed and taught?
No.
Or was it just English common law that was left over from from whatever?
Yeah.
What is largely the systems that exist in a lot of Muslim countries now? We've been impacted greatly by colonialism. They did, one of the Algerian generals is quoted, I can't remember his name, quoted to say something like, we have to get rid of the Arabic language. We have to get these people to stop talking in Arabic. You look at North Africa, what is on the streets? What language do you hear?
French.
You hear French. You hear more often than not. You hear French. I've been to Tunisia, and Arabic is there. They're very proud that alhamdulillah, there've been a lot of movements to revive the language, the culture, the legacy of Islam. But the schools are teaching in French, right? In our countries, the Southeast, Asia, schools that teach in English are like, we have to send them they teach in English here. I can't think of any school now that probably does not teach in English in Pakistan. Yeah. Which is, to me, it's like you have your own language. Be proud of it, right? You can still learn English, but what about our language? What about your culture? Why do we have to, and we understand, if you want to learn English, you'll learn, that's great. But, we have to get out of the history that has just pained us, of colonialism, and the people that came in and said, this is what you guys are missing out. And we still haven't gotten over the lure of something that was just very different than what we were used to. And it's going to be, I think we're still recovering from that,
Yeah.
as an ummah. But
Mhm.
I think we can owe it to a lot of recent movements, and a lot of our scholars, mashallah, who've done a wonderful job in connecting people back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the ground, like being on the ground, working with people, solving their problems, being there for them. A lot of the simple sunnahs that the Prophet ﷺ taught us, the hadith, haqqul muslimi ala al-muslimi sittun, the rights of one Muslim on another are 6 or 5 in one narration. And those are the basic things that we lack in our communities, right? Returning salam, visiting the sick, responding to a da'wah, when saying yarhamukallah when somebody sneezes. It's one of the rights the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. Is so small, but how often do you hear somebody, when they say alhamdulillah, who responds with yarhamukallah? Sometimes we even feel embarrassed just to say these du'as. So we have to go back to a lot of these basics, of engaging with each other, being proud of the fact that what we have is something special. And whatever is foreign needs to be taken with a grain of salt. When I say foreign, I mean foreign to the Quran and Sunnah. It has to be taken with a grain of salt, because what we have comes from the Creator, and whatever anybody else brings us, largely comes from ulterior motives and other places. So we just have to be we have to be proud to go back to our sources and our faith, inshallah.
Okay. Jazakallah khair for your time. I know we both have to go for Isha.
Oh yeah.
It was a great session. I really got to learn a lot. There's a lot of notes here.
Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah, I'm going to be putting timestamps. Jazakallah khair for joining me. And inshallah, I look forward to having you on again. I think there's a few topics that we touched on that we really need to elaborate on, inshallah.
Inshallah. Allah bless you for the work that you're doing, and inshallah,
Jazakallah.
you'll be able to get this message out and spread it, and gather tons and tons of hasanat. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
Inshallah.
accept from both of us our deeds, and make this something that will weigh heavily on the scale of good deeds on Yawm al-Qiyamah, inshallah.
Inshallah. I mean, Jazakallah khair, Imam
Wa
Arshad.
iyyakum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Alaikum
barakatuh.
salam wa rahmatullah.